is it time for this card to come back to Legacy? Let's find out. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka ThrabenU here for another Legacy video, and today we are going to be playing with Gyruda, Doom of Depths. For those of you who haven't been playing Legacy for very long, you might have, luckily, missed the era of Legacy when this thing was an absolute menace. So when it enters the battlefield, each player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard, and then you can put a creature card with an even converted mana cost from among those cards onto the battlefield under your control. But the restriction for playing this as your companion is that you can only have cards with an even converted mana cost. So what were people doing with this that was broken? Prior to the change in the companion rules, you used to just be able to cast a companion for its mana cost. You didn't have to put 3 to put it into your hand. And you could use cards like Lion's Eye Diamond to play Gyruda as early as turn 1. Gyruda would reveal a bunch of clones, copying Gyruda, copying Gyruda, copying Gyruda, until you found a way to kind of give them all haste and crash in for lethal in a single turn. It was a, relatively speaking, glass cannon combo deck, but it was incredibly fast. But we can't really consistently do that plan anymore. So, one of our beloved Matthew H's, and there's 2 of them, they're both awesome. We'll see a deck from the other one later this week or next week as well. One of them donated to see what would happen if we tried to take a mono black shell and remove Dark Rituals and replace it with some other fair cards. Like, would the deck still be reasonable if we go a little bit more down the card advantage side rather than the speed side? And sometimes one of the problems that the mono black decks have is that they do a lot of self-damage to themselves. So with Sign in Blood, Ancient Tomb, Thoughtseize, kind of whatever you have in that general ballpark, it's greatness at any cost, and that cost is oftentimes a decent number of your life points. But Passageway Seer, in addition to just taking the initiative, which is very strong, is also a way to gain some life. Now, I'm going to play the deck list as it was submitted to me, but Legacy is changing very quickly, so I'm kind of left with a question, and I think it's going to be a question we run into a lot with Legacy decks moving forward. And that's, do you play Karn the Great Creator? Now, this is a card that I've talked about quite a bit on my channel in various shells, in various forms, and I'm not the biggest fan of this. I think it's slow by Legacy standards. And I've been trying to remove this card from a lot of deck lists that I play, but there's this new problem in Legacy. You might have heard of it. And that's the One Ring. Karn the Great Creator is something that shuts off the One Ring while also being a relatively potent hate card for some combo decks and some artifact decks like, say, Painter or 8cast, both of which are relatively strong in the format right now. So when I pulled up this deck list this morning to record, my first thought was, hey, do I just rip Karn from this deck and play 3 copies of the One Ring? My second thought was, wait a second, is Karn important to stop opposing One Rings? Because, I'm a mono black deck and I'm not really good at answering artifacts. So it kind of left me in a weird spot. And then I had this third thought just now while recording this of, do I play Karn but put one Ring in my tutor board? And we're going to think about that when I take a look at the deck list in just a second here. Actually, why don't we just do that now? Now, today's video is sponsored by both moxfield.com as well as Cool Stuff Inc. If you end up needing any of these cards for your personal paper collection, use promo code ThrabenU at Cool Stuff Inc. to save 5% on your order. So this is Matt's deck list here, and I believe he went 10-5 in testing in paper, but wasn't able to do any games on Magic Online, so we're going to see how it holds up in that environment. We have some cards that you are probably used to seeing from recent videos, and Orcish Bowmasters is now maybe moving up to a format-defining card in Legacy, at least in the short term. But there's one here that you might not recognize, the Black Gate. This can enter tapped unless you pay 3 life, and the wording here is a little wonky, but for 1 and a black and tapping this, you can choose a player with the most life or tied for the most life. Target creature can't be blocked by creatures that player controls this turn. So in a deck like this one, or maybe a deck like Death's Shadow, this can be a way to make your creature unblockable, presuming that your opponent has the higher life total. And speaking of life totals, we're hoping that the combination of our favorite Tiefling Warlock Passageway Seer, along with Sheoldred the Apocalypse, will offset the life loss that we get from things like Sign in Blood and Ancient Tomb. The sideboard is a small Karn package. Note that Matt's version he submitted had Pithing Needle in this spot, and just now while recording the deck tech, I decided that a copy of the One Ring is probably a good idea. I really like the One Ring alongside initiative cards because it allows you to take the initiative, play it, get protection from everything so your opponent can't get it back, and get deeper in there before you actually start contesting it. Some of Matt's earlier versions had large creatures like Archon of Cruelty that you could hit either off of Gyruda or off of something like Passageway Seer. And I guess the last thing that I'm thinking about right now is whether or not Vicious Battle Rager should just become Ravenloft Adventurer. And I feel like the answer is yes. So this is also another creature that takes the initiative. It's a 3/4 starting power and toughness, which I think is much more relevant than this 1/5. Once you are at the 4th point of toughness, like the toughness kind of becomes irrelevant. And this is going to be a stronger threat on its own a lot of the time. While Vicious Battle Rager, I think, is fine for something like Pauper, I think its starting power is just too low to rumble in Legacy. So I think I'm going to go ahead and make this substitution real quick, and then go ahead and go into the league directly. Yeah, I think that's what I have to say here. Thanks to Matt for sending this in, and let's see how these adjustments to the deck list do. Let's battle. I have kept a relatively fair-looking hand here. I don't have a turn 1 play, which I dislike, but I do have like a really wide range of options for turn 2. I think I'm just going to play Bowmasters and pass against an unknown opponent here. And then next turn, I'll intend on casting Sign in Blood to make my land drop. So my opponent didn't just play out a cantrip, because playing it out into Orcish Bowmasters doesn't make a lot of sense. But I really do need to just fire this card off now. Yep. So we probably prevented our opponent from casting that spell on turn 1 if that's something they wanted to do, but then we kind of lost out on a little bit of value here. They're potentially playing against a Delver deck. Yeah, it does indeed look like we are playing against Delver. If I play Dalthy Voidwalker and it resolves and then I grief afterwards, that's kind of cool, but I think I am just supposed to Sign in Blood myself and continue to hit my land drops. The easiest way for me to lose this game is this card just getting wastelanded here. Do I grief my opponent right now? I probably don't need to yet. Again, I would like to grief after Dalthy Voidwalker to prevent cards from going to graveyard and to give my Dalthy Voidwalker some extra flexibility in case my opponent is playing something very large and dumb like a Minsk and Boo in their main deck, for example. I don't expect them to be. A lot of the Grixis decks, a lot of the Delver decks are now gravitating towards Grixis because Orcish Bowmasters is a card that exists. And if so, I'm giving them some extra fixing with my Urborg as of right now. So, do I want to continue trying to hit land drops? Yes, but I think it is probably time to make a move that looks like this. So that's putting an extra card into the graveyard, potentially for the purposes of a Murktide Regent. I now believe it is worth 2 cards to attempt to grief my opponent. Note here that we can't play the Reanimate package that we usually see with grief, because Reanimate is odd. Oh, fuck. Well, I got 3 random intro player booster packs for some reason, and my opponent is very much not doing what I thought they were doing. So I can put an Emrakul under my Dalthy Voidwalker. Do I win the game if I do that? My opponent casts Show and Tell, they put in a Grizzlebrand, they draw a whole bunch of cards. I beat that. Opponent casts Show and Tell. Putting in Sneak Attack. If they get Lotus Petal, things could be dicey. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go for Emrakul here. Yeah. There's some small degree of risk here. Definitely read my opponent's deck wrong, though, obviously. The sort of nice thing is that if my opponent casts Show and Tell and puts in Grizzlebrand, I get to put in Sheoldred, which is really fucking good against Grizzlebrand. Alright, so there is Show and Tell. I put in Sheoldred. Ooh, Archon of Cruelty was a great draw there. So I need to get rid of Sheoldred so that I can keep my Doubt the Voidwalker to do my thing. Alright, and my opponent has conceded because I just get to cast Emrakul, take an extra turn, attack them, obliterate their permanents. So that was a cool line. Though the downside of playing a deck that looks like mine is that a lot of times I'm not really going to get to sideboard because essentially my sideboard is Leyline of the Voids, a small Karn package, and then a couple of other random things. And like, these random things are okay, but only that. My initiative cards are not necessarily at their best here. I will probably end up getting rid of some portion of them. So Passageway Seer is probably better than Ravenloft Adventurer here. There's some removal situations where that might not be true, but this, in theory, should deal more damage over time. So I think I'm going to cut my Ravenloft Adventurers to play a couple of Edicts and Turok, which can be kicked later on in the game for some real amounts of value. Generally speaking, I'm kind of not a fan of this matchup. Like, Show and Tell, historically speaking, tends to be good against Chalice decks because the Chalice doesn't actually stop any of your win conditions. This is a slightly awkward hand that can interact on turn 1 and turn 2. The mana's not perfect here, but I think I'm happy enough with this. I'm going to hope that Grief into Bowmasters is strong enough to get me through the early game and get me to something like Karn. I don't need that second Sign in Blood, so that's going to become my pitch for Grief. Now, my opponent can Brainstorm and hide their best card here, but I think I need to play this on turn 1 rather than trying to like wait a turn, play it on turn 2, and like flash in a Bowmasters in response to this. Just because like Soul Land Show and Tell is a thing that could very easily happen, or like land Lotus Petal Show and Tell. So I think I just have to try to disrupt here. Alright, let's see what we've got left. Force of Will and Daze. I beat Show and Tell Emrakul. I can play around Daze in the short term. That probably means I take Force of Will. Next turn, I already have Sheoldred's Edict for an Emrakul. I will take Force of Will. Note that leaving them with Daze is going to be slightly awkward as this game goes on, and it will make something like Karn noticeably worse. Hopefully that's fine. Alright, fully expecting to just see Ancient Doom Show and Tell here. Okay, it is not happening. Draw step, Surgical Extraction on Grief. Understood. Okay, so now what? Chalice and Bowmasters are both reasonable draws, and they work against the same cards in different ways. I think I am just supposed to shut off my opponent's cantrips here. Like, this is a time where, generally speaking, I know that the coast is clear to do so. My opponent has an Otawara that they could use to bounce this out of play, but if they do that, then they're potentially missing a land drop. Yep. Ooh, no, it is a Sneak Attack, which is real awkward for me, because now I have to hold up Sheoldred's Edict basically forever, and as soon as my opponent gets to red, they beat me. Like, I have Orcish Bowmasters that I can flash in at end of turn, and that helps a little bit, but... Alright, so there's the activation. Sacrifice a non-token creature, and then that'll get shuffled in. And I have to find a way to deal with that second Emrakul, which is a little tough to do because I only have single black, so him to Turok doesn't do it. What are my outs here? Karn is not an out. They don't get another turn. I believe my out is my opponent not activating. So if I play this and Sign in Blood myself, I just have colorless available. It would have to be exactly Lotus Petal and one of my 3 remaining edicts. Damn. I guess this technically doesn't kill me. It's just awful in every way. I will float mana, lose 3 permanents, flash in a Bowmasters to make future cantrips worse. I'm still playing this around days. Get to ping my opponent here. I eat 15 damage. My opponent's cantrips are on. This does not bode well for me. And Sign in Blood, a little spooky. Alright. The little Bowmasters that could. Again, I don't like my prospects here. Okay, just a land drop is great for me. That's not bad. I don't Sign in Blood my opponent, but that might be something that comes up in other portions of the league. I am going to pre-combat Sign in Blood myself in case a very fringe line happens. But I think my opponent's just going to take the days here. No, okay. So next turn I can go to 1 and cast either a Passageway, Seer, Sheoldred, or Karn. Again, I am fully at the mercy of my opponent's deck, though. Something weird is happening over there, like a Pyroclasm or something? A fire. Sure. So I now can't cast a 4-drop on my turn. Ooh, and they get to Brainstorm. Wait, didn't they make their land drop already? That was just probably a punt, right? Like, if you wait so you can play Volcanic Island, I potentially die this turn to any creature. Alright, so this land is currently off, at least in the normal capacity. I expect that I am dead on my opponent's next turn, but I've kind of thought I've been dead for a while, and we're still here. Okay, there's the activation. That'll do. Put up a good fight there. Now I get a game where I'm on the play. Don't know that anything will really change in terms of my sideboarding here. I'm happy with all the cards that I am playing. I could make some very, very, very small adjustments, like play a 1 ring. I think I'm good with not introducing extra colorless cards into the deck. This does not have enough mana to be functional, and is going to be a little soft to a daze. But is otherwise probably a keep. I just have to decide which of these lands goes back. It's like, do I want to hedge ever so slightly versus a Blood Moon, or do I want the ability to get a creature back? I think I'd rather hedge against the moon, honestly. And we'll just do this and pass. I'm definitely terrified of my opponent's like fastest hands here. Alright, so I always play Dauthi Voidwalker. The game gets a little more complicated from here. I'm going to cast a Grief. I think I pitch Sign in Blood, so that if my opponent has Show and Tell and puts in Archon of Cruelty, I put in a second creature and can keep a Dauthi Voidwalker. Alright, pitching a Fire Ice, sure. Would love to draw another piece of discard to have the potential to do something kind of broken with Dauthi Voidwalker. Alright, we're in scary territory. 3 red, that's red. A Braid, sure. Okay, that's fine. Like, that definitely could have been worse for me. Daze is online if I play this card. I don't have any support for Dauthi Voidwalker right now. I think I'm just going to jam this and get this to start scaling up. This also just gives me another land drop for next turn, which allows me to play both Dauthi Voidwalker and put Gyruda in my hand, like working towards that as something that also could just be powerful. And then at our end step, we have the initiative, so we get our counter. This immediately puts this out of the range of fire. It's not out of the range of a Braid. All right, Show and Tell is happening. Do I put in Dauthi Voidwalker or do I put in Swamp? If I put in Swamp, I have the ability to top deck another land and play Gyruda. Playing Gyruda does not feel insane. I think I will put in Douthie Voidwalker. Archon of Cruelty. So which one of my creatures would I like to keep? Probably Douthie Voidwalker. I think it gives me more possibility to do something broken. And I will go down the Lost Well side to scry in order to try to make that happen. Chalice goes on the bottom. Passageway Seer would get me to Stash or Arena, neither of which does anything. I'm going to bottom this. That is not the edict that I was looking for. A Braid does not do anything here. Show and Tell doesn't do anything. Delta doesn't really do anything. So I can put Gyruda to my hand. I don't think that really does anything. I think this game is fully about, do I draw an edict for this Archon, and is my opponent out of gas beyond that? I don't want to Polluted Delta, I don't think, because I have 2 cards on bottom that I don't want to draw. I think I will just cast a Chalice on 1 and hit my opponent for 3. And hope for the best. Getting Polluted Delta specifically means that if I draw Sign in Blood next turn, I could Sign in Blood into an Edict. So, there is some merit to grabbing Polluted Delta there. But I think that putting this Chalice in play makes it harder for my opponent to do a second thing that beats me. And that matters at least to some extent. There's a Lotus Petal. I will concede then. My opponent has lethal on board. GG's. Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, which is, in my opinion, the best Magic the Gathering website for hosting your deck lists online. One of my favorite features is that you can create your own custom tags for when you're deck building. So let's say you're building a commander deck and you want to know, hey, how many copy effects do I have? You can just create a tag and sort everything, and there's fun little hotkeys so that you can do this more quickly. So really, please consider checking them out if you are looking to tinker with deck lists online. Okay, I am going to have a very tough choice on turn 1, and it's which of these black creatures do I imprint? Sheoldred is much better versus the random cantrips decks of the format, but has a weakness to Karakas, and Ravenloft Adventurer is both of these cards are good in different ways. I'm always playing him to Turok on turn 1. That is just always a thing that I am going to do. I think I imprint Sheoldred, despite the fact that I think Sheoldred is kind of the better card in a vacuum, mostly because Ravenloft Adventurer will help me get extra mana to work towards Karn nonsense. So I think that's the way that I'm going here. So pitch Sheoldred, and we do the very fun for me play of him to Turok on turn 1 on the play. Oh, hitting 2 lands. That very well may just immediately end the game. Nope, opponent has more lands than just that. And is potentially on some sort of combo deck. Actually, no, they discarded a Wasteland. This is probably Grixis Delver. Ooh, negative. It is not quite Grixis Delver. It is just straight up going to be probably a Grixis mid-range deck. It could, I guess, technically just be a blue-black deck, but Power Blasts are good. I have lost my initiative card. It would be a great turn to just draw like a Sign in Blood. Otherwise, I'll put Gyruda to my hand. No Sign in Blood. So Gyruda will come hang out in my hand. We're many, many turns away from casting our tentacled friend here. Well, opponent hit 2 land drops despite him to Turok taking 2 lands, and it is Bug rather than Grixis. Ooh. And they get another land drop here as well. Yeah, normally for these sorts of controlling decks, like taking 2 lands out of their opening hand would be just game over. Not this time, though. Lotus Petal is great. Let's attempt a Karn. I'm going to immediately minus Karn. I want this, but I think it's correct to just take this and continue to pressure lands. My opponent probably has creatures that are, roughly Baleful Strix size, Snapcaster Mage sized, so Karn is going to stick around a decent portion of the time. Man, I was just thinking about how much of a pain in the ass Leovold would be. Like, specifically, like, that's also just good against the One Ring. I have Ensnaring Bridge, right? I do have Ensnaring Bridge. So I think Ensnaring Bridge becomes the plan to protect this Karn. So let's cast that. I have 3 cards in hand currently, which means in order to save Karn from Leovold, I do have to cast a Chalice on 0, which will shut off some of my things moving forward. So this is one of those times where things are awkward. I think my opponent is favored. They've done such an amazing job of hitting land drops. Alright, something else is happening. They kind of sat there and thought for a minute. Wow, main deck Pernicious Deed. That's pretty brutal. So how do I want to do this here? Like, I can destroy one of their land drops in exchange for one of their other cards. Or no, it's actually 2, right? Yeah, it's actually 2. Once for the coding, once for the Karn. Not the best for me. Don't think I play this out. Probably plus on my own Chalice, though, right? Probably plus on my own Chalice. That opens up playing artifact mana in a reasonable way. Where are my Bowmasters? They're also slightly awkward in the face of Leovold. My opponent's got mana, but nothing really to do with it. Oh, they are sorcery speed activating Pernicious Deed. What is the follow-up that makes that make sense? That blows up Leovold. Is this the pause of someone who didn't realize they were going to blow up their own Leovold? Reanimate on Grief. Sure. Okay, that is a punish for taking out the liquid metal coating, but I would have lost it anyway. Ooh. One ring, while it's guaranteed to resolve, seems really strong. Let's minus. Play the one ring. This gives me a fog from the grief, and I'll draw a card. Passageway Seer is reasonable. Introducing the initiative while my opponent has a creature in play isn't necessarily the best, but we'll figure out something to do. My second Karn isn't exactly insane. Oh man, that's annoying. That's so good. And I took the Pithing Needle out of my deck. That deals no damage. Alright. Orcish Bowmasters. That's not bad. Let's draw some cards. I can have 6 or 7 mana this turn. I think I play Passageway Seer while holding up Orcish Bowmasters. My opponent will probably Grist minus, trying to kill my Passageway Seer. And then I'll Orcish Bowmasters to kill the insect token. That's pretty good against most things that aren't Force of Will. What if I play out Orcish Bowmasters ahead of time? Then my opponent always pluses Grist. Yeah, I think I go for the objectively strong plan here. Grab a swamp, pass the turn. There's some small degree of risk for not playing out the Orcish Bowmasters for if my opponent draws exactly Force of Will. But I think this is setting up for such a wicked blowout play that I just go for it. Yep. This is exactly like I wanted here. So we will ping that insect token. So they can sacrifice their grief if they want. They do not want. I sacrifice a creature. Okay, yeah. One Ring's really good, folks. Really, really, really good. Alright, so my opponent has some graveyard-based synergy. I don't think enough that a Leyline of the Void is probably going to be worth it. Turok as a random value card is reasonable. I don't want to be playing Chalice of the Void versus my opponent's deck. Like, my opponent has sweepers like Pernicious Deed and like random things like Witherbloom Command. Like Chalice is just not super acceptable. And this probably means that I'm just filling the deck with 2 copies of Sheoldred's Edict to get rid of smaller creatures. Like, I could play Leyline of the Voids. It does help with grief and some other fringe things, but I don't know that I'm excited about that. I think I just want all my cards to have an impact. I have kept what I would consider a slow but stable hand here. and we'll see what my opponent has to offer. My opponent's deck is playing Wasteland. Would I care if they Wastelanded me? The answer is no, because they are down 2 cards already. I'm just going to play a tapped land this turn and not care if I get Wastelanded. Alright, there's another land drop. And a Collect Roof. That has minimal impact versus what I am doing here. I will happily Hymn to Turok my opponent. Yeah, that hasn't changed. I'm just going to take the 2-for-1 after my opponent has mulligan to 5. We still got the 2-for-1. My opponent had some card they really wanted to protect, though. So it maybe wasn't a land. They didn't just play that out immediately. I think this is an Orcish Bowmaster's turn, rather than just jam one of the 4-drops. Yeah, I think I'm just going to play this and pass. I am going to play this mostly to see how my opponent reacts to it. Hell yeah. Alright, my opponent is at 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This can be a Sheoldred's Edict followed by a Karn. Non-token creature. Do I want to play around a Spell Pierce effect? I think I'm always playing this land this turn. Well, if this gets countered by a hard counter, something like a Drown in the Lock, I would want to play this land instead. Okay, yeah. Non-token creature. Get in there. Okay, so now we will go ahead and Lotus Petal, City. I think I Karn first and just get that going. We will immediately Karn minus and pick up Liquid Metal Coating again. Like, I can always pivot to the One Ring or something on my turn, but I really want to have the ability to just nuke all of my opponent's lands. Like they are on 2 after a mulligan to 5. Alright, GG's, so we're 1-1. Okay, I have kept my opening hand here. There's some tension in that Ancient Tomb plus Chalice of the Void is my best turn 1 play, but doing that gets rid of my best turn 2 play unless I draw a couple of very specific cards, like a Lotus Petal, a Chrome Box, or an Urborg. But in the dark, I am still probably supposed to do this. And we get Dazed. No follow-up Brainstorm. Could be playing against a Delver deck, could be playing against another blue-based combo deck. Yeah, and see here is kind of exactly what I'm talking about. I don't get to Dalthy Voidwalker this turn, so I have a choice of leave up Sheoldred's Edict or just put Gyruda into my hand this turn. I think I'm just going to put Gyruda into my hand. I don't know what my opponent is playing yet. Like, if they're Delver and they're pretty likely to just play a creature on this next turn, like, holding up Sheoldred's Edict is fine, but if they're not, okay, sure. Yeah, like, now knowing what I was playing against, the removal spell. Oh, it is Cephalid Breakfast, actually. My mana base comes back to bite me yet again here, as I have 4 mana, but only the ability to cast a single spell here. And we're in kind of a Schrodinger's Stoneforge situation where I don't know if my opponent has a Caldra in hand or not. And that changes my evaluation of what I want to do in this turn cycle greatly. Playing Ravenloft Adventurer is just kind of bad versus a singular Swords to Plowshares. This is an incredibly awkward turn. Alright, I'm going to make you sacrifice a non-token creature. And it's very possible that that does literally nothing. My opponent can just like play Cephalid Illusionist, play Shuko, and I die. Alright, there is Shuko. Alright, my opponent is Landlight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can jam Gyruda this turn. I don't really think that is correct, though. I think it is better for me to play multiple spells, including Dalthy Voidwalker. The Dalthy Voidwalker resolving is more important than the Ravenloft Adventurer resolving right now. I'm going to go ahead and play this first. So this one is played around days. Good enough to get a response. I'm slightly surprised that if my opponent had Brainstorm, they didn't just do it on their turn to play around Orcish Bowmasters. That unfortunately did eat a Force of Will. A Narcomoeba is gone. We'll see if I get got by a Daze here now. I do not. This gives me the 6th mana for Gyruda next turn, which can get me into a Douthie Voidwalker or Orcish Bowmasters or something. But again, I might just die. Like, that is fully something on the menu before, like, this takes off. Yep. Yep, so I am unfortunately dead to this, so my opponent will combo off and do the whole Thassa's Oracle thing. I'm going to go ahead and skip forward here. Okay, at this point, I can see the full combo. I see the Thassa's Oracle, there's Cabal Therapy plus Dread Return. My opponent has enough resources at this point where I can't win, so I'm not going to show my opponent extra cards here that I don't have to. Like, I can see the deterministic win on board. Notably here, my opponent's build does have Daze and also has Teferi's Bowmasters and does have Caldra. No Urza Saga that we innately saw. I think I said this in a recent video, but I find this a very frustrating deck to board against because if you focus too much on the combo aspect, you lose to the fair aspect and vice versa. I'm probably going to go ahead and play Leylines. They do technically contribute towards a Helm of Obedience kill as well. Chalice is medium against my opponent. I'm not the biggest fan of Grief without also having Reanimate. While this is fine versus the combo side, it's pretty weak. Like, two for one myself versus the fair portion of my opponent's deck is, generally speaking, not the best. Sign in Blood felt slow this time, but I think that is just because I was on an Ancient Tomb opener. Like, I probably lost that game to my mana base, if I'm being completely honest. The ability to not multiple spell, and like I had to time walk myself on, I think it was turn 2, putting Gyruda into my hand instead of doing something relevant. Edicts make me significantly better versus fair Stoneforge stuff, and the Turoks make me better against like fair removal options. I think I'm going to do something like this and maybe like drop 1 sign-in blood to round things out. This is not good. I don't have stable mana. This hand has the same problem as the last one, where I don't have black, and that matters so much. I have essentially 1 draw. Like, the top card of my library needs to be a swamp, I think, for this hand to be reasonable. I think I would rather go to 5 than keep that. Okay, what's the tap restriction on this? Control 2 or more other land that enters tapped. Okay, so this is a reasonable early play. I keep this hand. I think I just don't get to Lotus Petal here, and I think I will get rid of Sheoldred's Edict. Will be awkward if my opponent turn 2 Stoneforge Mystics specifically, but otherwise I think multiple Orcish Bowmasters to ping their early creatures and punish cantrips is good. And then I'll just kind of decide, this could be very bad for me. Douthie Voidwalker, miss. Opponent now knows about Orcish Bowmasters, which is not the best. I think I am going to sorcery speed an Orcish Bowmaster so that my opponent can't like brainstorm in response to it. I'm unsure. If my opponent has like Stoneforge specifically for Caldra, then my opponent can like play a land drop and then play Stoneforge and give me a better chance at answering some of this stuff. Yeah, so my opponent would have just done this in the other order, right? Cast the Ponder, I flash this in, they remove that, I end up in the same spot. This time around, I have a threat in play. I think I want to treat this one as a removal spell and try to Turok my opponent here. Just break up their hand a little bit. This might just eat a Daze. And I'll attack for 1. Definitely starting to feel my Mold of 5, because I just have these like non-castable 4-drops in hand. Yep. There is Caldra. Now at this stage, I regret not having the Edict, but my opponent probably just would have waited to play this or gotten Shuko if I did it the other way. I'm still Dazeable, which is not the best. Let's see if my opponent makes a misplay here, because if I attack with this and they block, I can do cute things. No cute things for me. And I'm going to go ahead and get the Douthie Voidwalker out here. My opponent has said hard no to that. So basically none of my cards do anything right now, either because I don't have enough mana or because like my opponent's creature size plays around them. So I am going to die to this Caldra far before they die. I might die to combo as soon as next turn. Alright, I'll take some damage. Alright, so I will sorcery speed this to grow this token so I can attack for more damage. But I'm not a fan of what's happening on the other side of the battlefield. Like, I have removal spells I can draw to that get rid of Caldra, but I have to worry about Caldra while also just worrying about dying in 2 turns to damage and also just dying instantly to combo. Okay, that's a thing. That's also a thing. My opponent can move the Shuko around now. Yep. Yeah, so like I can play Ravenloft Adventure, introduce the initiative into the game, which is actively a bad thing for me here. I'm gonna throw in the towel. Like I can tell that I am beat here. GG's. All right, we've got a mulligan here. I just physically do not have enough mana, and again, a chalice alone does not make a keepable hand in most matchups. Wow, we're mulliganing to 5. Okay. So if I'm willing to sacrifice speed, I have a very reasonable set of 5 cards. So I'm going to be keeping this and throwing back the fast mana. But I think we're going to end up in a similar spot to the last game where, like, I am just going to feel the loss of the cards so strongly. Like, the ability to cast one of these spells on turn 1 is so important, but once I'm already down 2 cards, I just don't think I can go down another card or 2 to accelerate my game. Alright. So, could be facing Doomsday, could be playing against a Orcish Bowmasters pile. We're probably playing against Doomsday. In which case, I basically lost this one for mulliganing to 5. Like, if I deploy one of these cards on turn 1, I think I'm in great shape to win the game, but having not deployed any of those, I am in very bad shape. Alright, my opponent has resolved their Doomsday. Their days consider deep analysis. Nonsense. Okay, got it. Unfortunately, I see 3 Force of Wills, so it probably doesn't matter too much what I do here. So the question is, am I better off playing an Orcish Bowmasters because I don't see Street Wraiths in here and hoping that the damage is relevant, or am I better off hemming and hoping that my opponent has relevant stuff in hand? And both lines have problems. Like, the Doomsday pile usually is self-contained with the stuff that you need in it, but, you know, if my opponent's Thassa's Oracle is in hand... Well, there's already a Thassa's Oracle in exile. I'm going to go with Bowmasters. Again, I think my opponent has a Force of Will, so I don't think this really matters. Like, I think this is an illusion of choice situation. Okay. They've got backup. All right, so there's Underground Sea. Yep, all right, there's Street Wraith. There's Street Wraith. Edge of Autumn. Onder, yeah. Bowmaster's resolving would have been huge, but it didn't. So I'm dead. All right, we die to Thassa's Oracle, and we move on to game 2. Unfortunately, my deck doesn't really get better versus Doomsday in post-sideboard games. Like, the cost of playing a sideboard that has a Karn package is that a lot of times you don't get to do cool stuff in post-sideboard games. Like, I can play 2 Turok Dreadcanters to fill in for Sheoldred's Edict, or I can keep Sheoldred's Edict to be better against my opponent's opposing Sheoldreds. But I think I am just going to take another body that I can play early. Do we not run enough lands in this deck? What is my count? 19 lands, plus another 5 mana sources. Maybe a little light, but not this. Fuck. Okay. Go to 5 again, I think, for the 3rd game in a row. So I keep this. The plan is just turn 2 him to Turok into turn 3 Ravenloft Adventurer, and I don't think I have really any ability to deviate from that. But it's just frustrating because, like, I think on average my draws should be lining up slightly better than this. Cool. If I lose my early piece of interaction, drawing Lotus Petal would be cool so that I can Ravenloft Adventurer this turn. Denied. I will make the play that I can make. Getting a creature in play gives me better odds versus just beating a pass the turn Doomsday line. My opponent has a counterspell. This is a very long pause. Yep. They've pitched one copy of Thassa's Oracle. So this is 3 mana. Doomsday is now possible. And Doomsday will beat a pass the turn Ravenloft Adventurer line just 100% of the time. Yep, so my opponent is at 8. Yep. Can't pay the kicker cost for this. I'm 1 black short. So I will die on their turn. I'll pretend that I'm playing Magic. Look, I cast a spell. I get to pick up a swamp, but then I'm just fully dead. Alright, so there's cycle, 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 fetch, and Thassa's Oracle. Yeah, my deck just has tripped over itself in the past few games, just mana-wise. Like, I am really missing Dark Ritual. I am not in love with this. This may just be a game where I keep this, and the thing that makes it keepable is just Gyruda, because I can Gyruda relatively quickly, but I am very not excited about this keep. Like, conversely, I am just going to die on turn 1. Okay, I'm not going to die on turn 1. Cool. Sorcery speed, turn 1 brainstorm? Okay. Oh, are we playing against a storm variant? We are. Okay, cool. I am going to die on turn 1. I'm not going to die on turn 1. God damn it, Veil of Summer. Oh, that's annoying. Actually, it's not. I just put my Chalice on 1 instead of my Chalice on 0 like I was planning on doing. Orcish Bowmasters. Not a bad card. One has 0 cards in hand. So Chalice on 1 is very strong. I am not going to play out Chrome Mox this turn in case Burning Wish gets something wild like a Pulverize or something over there. Yeah, you can... Alright, so they've seen my Ancient Tomb. Okay. If this is getting Hellbent for an Infernal Tutor, they get a pass. So they're cracking for 3 mana. Playing Burning Wish with 3 other mana remaining. Are we just going to Galvanic Relay again? Echo of Eons? How are you going to get that to... Yeah, okay. That was a weird game. So my Sheoldred's Edict probably have no text or very, very close to no text in this matchup. Turox will replace those. And then the only other question is, do I want to play Leyline of the Void? Like, my opponent does have some things like Echo of Eons that and Rite of Flame that impact the graveyard, but Sign in Blood is about the only thing that I would want to cut. Do I want to play 3 Leylines over Sign in Blood? Not sure that I really do. I definitely don't when I'm on the play. When I'm on the draw, it's a little more dubious. Like, on the draw, I could do this and be perfectly happy with that. On the play, Sign in Blood becomes a little more relevant. How fast can I make Karn? Turn 1? Turn 1 Karn is respectable. And, like, I have other things to do. Or if this doesn't just innately work out. Sure. The Metalcraft is on. Alright, they're going for it. It is just a Galvanic Relay, though. Finding a shit ton of 0-cost artifacts. Wouldn't you know it? And Abrupt Decay, which does not answer Karn. Ancient Tomb also makes this easier. So Lotus Petal, Ancient Tomb, Chrome Mox. This gets me to 4 mana. I'll save Orcish Bowmasters over Turok. Play Karn. And that should pretty much just end the game, I think. Yeah, you can take 1 card there, that's fine. Am I just minusing? I might just plus. Like, I don't necessarily want to just expose some of my stuff to random nonsense. Sure. You draw an empty? Another Galvanic Relay. Okay, most of that does nothing. Infernal Tutor is kind of nice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Mycosynth Lattice, GG. Imprint Bowmasters, minus. Yes. Lattice, City. No spells for you. And that will end the league with a 2-3 finish. So at the end of the day, where am I at regarding this deck list? I don't necessarily think this was bad, but I definitely stumbled a lot. Like, the absolutely insane number of black symbols that are here means that the Ancient Tombs and City of Traders come at a real price. So I think you need to adjust for not having Dark Ritual in some capacity, because Dark Ritual is often something that like bridges you to these black cards. All right, so in no particular order, things that I don't like. Number one is this whole like black pip colorless situation. Number two is that the griefs feel out of place for the most part without access to reanimate. I guess number three, Karn feels like it should be a 4 or 0 to me. If we are going to expend 6 of our sideboard slots for Karn, I feel like we either go up to the 4th or cut Karn completely to kind of zero in on more versatile sideboard options. You know, your Plague Engineers, some other anti-combo cards. I understand wanting Grief because it does cool things with Dauthi Voidwalker, like we saw in the Show and Tell matchup. But I'm not sure where I stand overall. This is also a deck that like you could just literally maybe cut like some number of Griefs and Sign-in Bloods for a copy of the One Ring, and maybe a couple of main deck removal spells, like, or the One Ring, 2 more Sheoldred's Edict or Sudden Edict or whatever, and try to play a reasonable game that way. I think those are the sorts of things that I would be looking at here. The deck gets a shaky sideways thumb from me in that I kind of like the design, but would need more reps to know how good the specifics are. I think I would probably cut the Black Gate just for another swamp. I think the 3 life is too great of a cost for a deck that a lot of times is not winning via traditional combat. Like, Dauthi Voidwalker avoids traditional combat anyway. And I don't know. I feel like effectively spending 3 mana to get unblockable for 1 turn is often not really going to be worth it. I did like the things that I had access to in the sideboard, and I feel like adding the One Ring as a Karn tutor target was reasonable. If you want to keep Karns, you could play 3 the One Ring, 1 in the sideboard as an additional tutor target, and then 3 more removal spells, or maybe like 1 more land, 2 more removal spells. I think those are the sorts of things that you should be thinking about if you end up wanting to mess around with this list on your own. I think we put Gyruda in hand a bunch of times. I don't know that we ever actually successfully resolved a Gyruda, though. So, you know, there's that. Folks, if you end up wanting to try any of these cards, these decks, these things in paper, remember Cool Stuff Inc. is my sponsor, and promo code ThrabenU will save you 5% on that order while supporting me. I hope you all have a great rest of the day. If you have any thoughts about this deck, let's throw them down in the comments below. See ya!